our son's 1-year anniversary, a couple approached us at his grave and said, "Thank you for donating your son's lungs. It saved our daughter's life." I froze, staring at the strangers. "What are you talking about? We never donated Pierce's organs." The couple looked confused while my husband shook before collecting himself. Aren't you Pierce Wade's parents?" The couple interrupted him. "We are, but Pierce flatlined naturally in his coma. There was no donation," I said. The woman pulled out her phone. "But this email says otherwise." She showed me the screen. "Organ donation authorization. Authorized by Carter Wade coordinating physician, Dr. Rachel Weinstein." My blood went cold. That was my husband's name. And Dr. Weinstein was the medical advocate who pressured us relentlessly about donating Pierce's organs when he was in his coma. "They're lying." My husband grabbed my arm. "That wasn't even our doctor. We're just going to." But the woman wasn't quitting. She pulled out her phone and started Googling. "Look, Memorial Hospital. The hospital both your son and our daughter stayed in. And Dr. Weinstein is..." Her jaw suddenly dropped. "Oh my God, did you know about this?" I got loose from Carter's grip and walked over to her phone. There I saw it. Dr. Weinstein, convicted for organ harvesting, sentenced to 11 years, paid families up to $75,000 to authorize organ donations from comatose patients. The silence was deafening. She kept reading. 14 confirmed cases where Weinstein paid family members to withdraw life support from patients showing signs of recovery. I turned to my husband, who was now pale and shaking. $75,000? You got $75,000? He was silent. "You killed our son for money." The recipient family stood frozen, the woman covering her mouth. "You told me he flatlined while I was getting coffee," I said, voice shaking. "You called me saying Pierce was crashing. By the time I got back from the cafeteria, he was dying. But you pulled the plug while I was gone, didn't you?" My husband couldn't meet my eyes. "You don't understand." "Understand what?" I yelled, tears streaming. "Lila was 4. She wrote a letter to Santa asking for her brother back and sealed it in a tear-stained envelope that all her classmates signed. She slept in his bed for months because it smelled like him. You watched her do that knowing you killed him for money." The recipient father stepped back, his face gray. "Oh God, our daughter killed him. We never would have." I continued. "I lost my job, the one I loved, because I couldn't function. We lost the house because I couldn't work, and you said the medical bills drained everything. But you had $75,000. The truth crushed me. My sister paid our mortgage for 6 months. My mother moved in to help with Lila while I had a breakdown. They emptied their savings while you had blood money to yourself. The boat," I whispered. "You got a brand new boat worth $60,000 2 months after Pierce died. You said it was your rich cousin giving it to you as our anniversary present, but he never gave it. You literally bought it with our son's life." Carter's face was deep red. "Did the therapy we go to at least help?" "The therapy." I cut him off, barely able to stand. "We went to 3 sessions in the first 8 months because we couldn't afford it." He looked down again. "But then you got promoted, and we could afford therapy," I said. "And of course, you're at every single one of these sessions now. You sit there every time while I sob about stepping away for coffee. You hold my hand while the therapist says I needed to forgive myself. You know I don't need forgiveness. You do. Remember what you said at his funeral?" I asked. Carter went completely pale. "You said we were both there fighting for him until the end. You gave a speech about being there when he needed it most. People called you Father of the Year while I was the mother who stepped away." The couple were breaking down, the mother throwing up. "Doctor, Namari said he was showing improvement," I continued. "Our boy squeezed my hand the day before. The doctor said he would wake up. His grandma was knitting him a sweater for the day he woke up while you were making sure he would never wear it." Carter was trembling. "Lila still draws pictures for him," I said quietly now. "Every week for his grave. She asks if he can see them from heaven. She's 6 now and still asks why God needed her brother more than she did. You destroyed her childhood for $75,000. My parents blame themselves," I added. "They think if they'd driven up that night, been there to support us, maybe Pierce would have fought harder. My dad has chest pains from the guilt. My mother takes anxiety medication. An entire family destroyed. The brightest part of it dead. All because you wanted 1 year's salary." The couple fled to their car while I pulled out Carter's car keys from my pocket. "I'm driving home. You're not coming with me." I pulled my phone out and started dialing. "Please don't call the police," he begged. "I'm not. I'm calling someone who'll do way worse than police ever would." I watched him visibly tremble as I pressed the phone to my ear. "Dad?" Carter's body looked like it took a screenshot. "Yeah, I'm at Pierce's grave, but I'm driving home alone and Carter really needs a ride." My voice stayed deadly calm. "Why?" "He'll just explain himself when you get here." I saw Carter start shaking his head and mouthing please. "You'll be here in 20? Perfect." I said, looking right at him. I hung up and Carter was just shaking. "Your father is an ex-Marine who loved Pierce more than life itself." I cut him off one last time. "He's driving you home. And once we're inside, you're going to tell him exactly what you did." I walked to the car. "My dad has buried men for less than what you did. Good luck." 20 minutes felt like 20 years standing there in the cemetery watching the road until Dad's black truck finally turned through the gates and I could see his white knuckles gripping the steering wheel even from 50 feet away. Carter started backing away from me, but there was nowhere to go except toward the truck that was now pulling up to the curb. And Dad didn't even look at me, just kept his eyes locked on Carter through the windshield like he was tracking a target. Carter's shoulders hunched forward and he walked to the passenger door like a man heading to his execution, while Dad sat there stone-faced and didn't reach over to unlock it until Carter had to tap on the window. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the quiet cemetery, and Carter climbed in while I turned and walked to my car without looking back, because if I saw Dad's face right then, I might have broken down completely. My hands were shaking so bad when I got in the driver's seat that I dropped the keys twice before getting them in the ignition and had to grip the wheel with both hands just to back out of the parking space. I made it maybe 2 miles before I had to pull over at a gas station because my vision was blurring from tears and my chest felt like it was crushed in a vice. I sat there in the parking lot recording everything on my phone while it was fresh, talking through sobs about the email the couple showed me, the exact amount of $75,000, every single word Carter said or didn't say when I confronted him. 10 minutes of recording turned into 20 as I remembered more details like how he grabbed my arm, how he went pale when I mentioned the boat, how he couldn't look at me when I talked about Lila's letter to Santa. I had to pull over again 3 blocks from home because my hands started shaking worse and I recorded more, this time about Dr. Weinstein and the pressure she put on us, how Carter was always the one who met with her alone while I stayed with Pierce. When I finally made it home, Mom's car was in the driveway and I could see her through the kitchen window with Lila at the table doing a puzzle, and everything looked so normal it made my stomach turn. I walked in through the back door and Lila jumped up and ran to me and I dropped to my knees and pulled her into the tightest hug while Mom watched with concern written all over her face. I told Lila I loved her about 10 times before looking up at Mom and mouthing that I needed her to take Lila for the night, and Mom just nodded without asking questions because she could see something was very wrong. Lila showed me the puzzle piece she found that looked like a butterfly, and I told her how smart she was while Mom started packing her overnight bag, and within 15 minutes they were gone and the house was silent. That evening I opened my laptop and found the video my cousin posted of Pierce's funeral on Facebook, and there was Carter at the podium in his black suit talking about how we both fought for our son until the very end. His voice was steady and strong as he said we were both there when Pierce needed us most, and I had to run to the bathroom to throw up when he talked about the sacred duty of parents to protect their children. I went back and watched it 3 more times, each viewing making me sicker as I noticed things I'd missed before, like how he kept adjusting his tie, when he mentioned being at the hospital and how his voice cracked not with grief but with something else when he said Pierce's death wasn't in vain. The video had over 200 comments calling Carter brave and strong and saying what amazing parents we were, and I screenshotted every single one knowing these same people would learn the truth soon enough. I logged into our online banking and started going through statements from 2 years ago, searching for any large deposits after Pierce died, and there it was on the screen making my blood freeze all over again. 3 separate cash deposits of $25,000 each, split across 2 weeks after Pierce's death, all marked as gift in the memo line, and I remembered Carter telling me his cousin had helped with funeral expenses. Something feels off about how Carter kept meeting with Dr. Weinstein alone while the mother stayed with Pierce. Why was he always the one handling those private conversations? The way he immediately tried to grab her arm and shut down the conversation when that. I downloaded every statement from that period and found more, smaller cash deposits of $5,000 here, $3,000 there, always just under the reporting limit and always with vague descriptions. The boat dealership's website still had the sales listing cached in Google, and when I clicked through, I found the exact date of purchase was 32 days after Pierce died, and the sale price was $58,000 cash. I took screenshots of everything, emailed them to myself 3 times at different email addresses, saved them to the cloud, printed hard copies and put them in a folder I hid in the garage behind old paint cans. I texted my sister a long message explaining everything that happened at the cemetery, and she responded immediately saying she was on her way and not to do anything until she got there. She arrived 40 minutes later with her laptop, a box of tissues, and a look on her face I'd never seen before, like she was ready to burn the world down. We sat at the kitchen table and she helped me organize everything into a timeline while I cried, and she kept saying she knew something was off about the boat and the sudden money, and why didn't she push harder. The next morning I called Memorial Hospital's records department and asked for all of Pierce's medical files, and the woman said it would take 2 weeks for processing, but when I said it was for potential legal action, she put me on hold. A supervisor came on and said they could expedite it to 3 days for an additional fee, and I gave them my credit card information while my sister sat next to me taking notes about every word they said. After hanging up, I called our therapist's office and left a message that I needed an emergency session. Just me without Carter, and my voice cracked when I explained there had been a major development about Pierce's death. The receptionist called back within an hour saying, Dr. Martinez could see me the next day at 7 in the morning before her regular appointment started, and I wrote it down with a shaking hand. That afternoon, I drove to Mom's house to check on Lila and kept my voice light and normal when she ran to show me her new drawing for Pierce of a rainbow with birds flying through it. She asked if Pierce could see rainbows in heaven, and I told her absolutely he could while Mom watched me from the doorway with worried eyes, and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom where I sobbed into a towel so Lila wouldn't hear. Late that night, after Lila finally fell asleep at Mom's house, I spread a huge poster board across my dining room table and started mapping everything out. I wrote Pierce's hospital admission date at the left edge and drew a long line across the board. Every single hospital visit went on there with different colored markers. Blue for when both Carter and I were there together. Red for when Carter was alone with Pierce. Green for every time that woman from the hospital called about organ donation. The red marks clustered around the final week like blood drops on paper. My hands cramped from gripping the markers so tight as the pattern became clear. Carter had been alone with Pierce for 3 hours the day before he died. 3 whole hours while I was home getting clean clothes and paying bills. The doorbell rang at 7 the next morning, and Dad stood there with his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He pulled me into a hug that felt like armor and said he'd handle all contact with Carter from now on. I showed him the timeline and watched his face go from red to white to gray. He took pictures of everything with his phone and said he was keeping copies in his safe. Later that morning, I found myself Googling Dr. Weinstein's name and clicking through pages of search results. An article from 2 years ago made me stop breathing. 14 families had come forward about their loved ones who died after Weinstein convinced family members to withdraw life support. The article had a link to a private Facebook group for the families, and my cursor hovered over it for 10 minutes before I clicked. My phone rang while I was reading their stories, and the hospital's number made my stomach drop. The risk manager introduced herself in that fake concerned voice people use when they're scared of lawsuits. She promised to look into my concerns personally and assured me the hospital took these matters very seriously. Her rehearsed words told me they already had lawyers involved. I hung up feeling sick. Dad texted me an hour later with just 4 words. Carter showed up here. Then another text came through with more details. He made Carter sit on the porch like a door-to-door salesman and confess everything. Carter admitted he signed the papers while I was at the cafeteria. Dad said Carter cried like a baby, but he didn't care. The next morning I sat in Dr. Martinez's office at 7 sharp with my hands shaking in my lap. She listened to everything without interrupting and then handed me a business card for a victim's rights attorney. She reminded me this wasn't my fault and that what I was feeling was real trauma from a real betrayal. The validation made me cry harder than I had in months. After the session, I drove straight to the bank and asked for copies of all our statements from when Pierce died. The teller started pulling them up on her computer and mentioned that cash deposits over 10,000 get flagged automatically. She printed everything and put it in a manila envelope that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. That evening while I was making dinner, my phone pinged with an email from someone named Margaret. Her son had been one of Weinstein's victims 3 years ago. She invited me to their support group meeting next week and warned me the legal process would take forever. She said the waiting was almost as hard as the betrayal itself. I was reading her email for the 3rd time when my phone rang with Lila's school number. Her teacher's voice was careful and worried as she explained Lila had been drawing pictures of hospitals during art time. She'd also been telling the other kids that her daddy was bad and did something wrong. My chest tightened as I scheduled an appointment with the school counselor for the next day. I needed to figure out how to help my daughter process this nightmare without destroying her relationship with her father completely. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived from the hospital with Pierce's complete medical records. I spread the papers across my kitchen table with shaking hands. Page 47 showed the exact time life support was withdrawn. 2:53 p.m. on March 15th. My coffee receipt from the cafeteria was timestamped at 2:48 p.m. Carter had told everyone Pierce flatlined naturally at 3:55 p.m. The lie was right there in black and white medical documentation. He'd pulled the plug while I was walking back with my stupid coffee and then waited an hour to call me. An entire hour of sitting next to our dying son, knowing what he'd done. I took pictures of every page and emailed them to myself and my sister and the attorney Dr. Martinez had recommended. The evidence was piling up like stones around Carter's neck, and I was going to make sure he drowned in it. The next morning, I went through our old phone bills online, something I'd never checked before because Carter always handled our accounts. The detailed billing showed every single call from his phone, and there they were. 3 calls to a number I didn't recognize on March 14th, the day before Pierce died. I typed the number into Google, and my stomach dropped when I saw it belonged to Weinstein's medical consulting office. The first call was at 9 in the morning and lasted 23 minutes. The second one came at noon for 19 minutes. The third was at 4:30 p.m. for 27 minutes. I screenshot everything and saved it to 3 different cloud accounts. My hands were shaking as I searched online for any news articles from when Pierce was in the hospital. Most of the results were about the accident that put him in the coma, but on page 4 of the search results, I found an article from our local paper dated March 13th. The headline was about hospital improvements, but buried in the middle was a quote that made me stop breathing. Dr. Namari had told the reporter that several coma patients at Memorial were showing encouraging signs of neurological improvement and might wake up within weeks. The article didn't name patients, but the timing was exactly 2 days before Carter pulled the plug on Pierce. I printed 20 copies of the article and highlighted Namari's quote with a yellow marker on each one. That afternoon, Dad showed up at the house with the phone records I'd emailed him. His face was stone cold as he drove straight to Carter's apartment without telling me he was going. 2 hours later, Dad texted me that Carter admitted getting the money, but swore he thought Pierce had no chance anyway. Dad said Carter cried like a baby and begged him not to tell me about the confession, but Dad recorded the whole thing on his phone. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number while I was reading Dad's message. The recipient mother had gotten my number somehow and was asking if we could talk because her daughter was alive thanks to Pierce, but she couldn't live with the guilt of benefiting from what Carter did. I stared at her message for 10 minutes before typing back that I'd think about it. 3 days later, I sat in the office of a victim's rights attorney that the support group had recommended. She looked at all my evidence and explained that criminal charges against Carter were unlikely because proving intent would be nearly impossible. She said civil action was our best bet, but even that would take years and might not result in much. She told me to keep gathering evidence and document everything because you never know what might turn up. Why did Carter make those 3 phone calls to Weinstein's office the day before Pierce died? What were they discussing for 20-something minutes each time? The timing of that newspaper article about patients improving seems awfully convenient for someone looking to make a quick decision about life support. The next week, a manila envelope arrived from the prosecutor's office with a copy of Weinstein's plea agreement transcript. Page after page showed her admitting to targeting financially vulnerable families with improving patients because they were easier to convince. She described her exact script for approaching family members when one spouse was absent. She admitted to telling families their loved ones had no chance when medical records showed otherwise. Reading her words felt like someone was ripping my chest open all over again. The bank manager called me personally to say she'd found more documentation about Carter's deposits. The certified letter she sent confirmed the cash deposits were converted to cashier's checks within days and then wired directly to Marine Dreams boat dealership. The paper trail was so clear that even a child could follow the money from Pierce's death to Carter's new toy. I drove to our old house where Carter was staying temporarily and demanded he sign a financial restraining order I had drawn up. Dad sat in his truck in the driveway with the engine running, making sure Carter knew he was there. Carter's hands shook as he signed the papers without even reading them. He kept looking out the window at Dad's truck and sweating through his shirt. The first support group meeting was held in a church church basement downtown, and I almost turned around 3 times before walking in. 7 other parents sat in a circle, and when it was my turn to share, another mother started crying before I even finished. She said Weinstein had used the exact same words with her family about her daughter having no quality of life. She said Weinstein told her the same lie about other families being grateful for the chance to donate. We were all victims of a practice script delivered by a monster in a white coat. Later that night, I remembered our old tablet that we shared for shopping lists and family stuff. I powered it on for the first time in months and went through Carter's messages. There in his text to his brother from 2 months after Pierce died was a photo of the boat with Carter bragging about what a smart investment it was. His brother had replied asking how they afforded it, and Carter wrote back that he'd gotten a bonus at work and found a great deal. Not one word about where the money really came from. I screenshot those messages too and added them to my growing file of evidence that would make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man Carter really was. The next morning, I called Child Protective Services from my car in a parking lot outside their office. My hands shook as I explained the situation about Carter killing our son for money. The caseworker listened quietly and took notes while I talked about needing to protect Lila from a father who'd sold her brother's life. She told me to document everything and suggested I file for emergency custody with supervised visitation only. I wrote down every word she said and asked her to email me the forms I'd need. She explained that with evidence of financial exploitation and medical fraud, the court would likely grant temporary orders fast. I filled out the paperwork right there in my car, using the steering wheel as a desk. My sister texted me that she'd been going through old photos and found something weird on Carter's computer calendar from 2 years ago. She sent me a screenshot showing a meeting with someone called RW Patient Advocate the exact night Carter claimed Pierce started crashing. The timing was too perfect to be random. RW had to be Rachel Weinstein. My sister kept digging and found 3 more meetings in the weeks before Pierce died. Each one was marked private and scheduled for when I'd be at work or running errands. The hospital's legal team called me that afternoon offering $25,000 if I'd sign papers promising not to talk about what happened. The lawyer's voice was smooth and practiced as he explained this was a goodwill gesture to help our family heal. I told him silence is what let Weinstein hurt 14 families and hung up. He called back immediately and raised the offer to $50,000. I blocked the number. That evening my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Dr. Namari, who I hadn't heard from since Pierce died. His voice sounded broken as he said he'd been reviewing Pierce's file after hearing about the investigation. He confirmed that he'd recommended waiting at least another week before any decisions about life support. Pierce's brain activity had been improving, and there were signs of responsiveness that suggested recovery was possible. He said he'd told Carter this directly, but Carter insisted Pierce wouldn't want to live that way. Namari's voice cracked when he said he should have pushed harder and he'd testify if needed. I saved the voicemail 3 different places and transcribed every word. My attorney worked fast and sent preservation letters to the hospital, and Carter's lawyer demanding they keep all records and communications. She explained this would stop them from destroying evidence and create legal consequences if anything went missing. The letters went by certified mail and email to make sure there was proof of delivery. She also filed discovery requests for every single document related to Pierce's care and Weinstein's involvement. The legal machinery was slow, but at least it was moving. 2 days later, Carter's boss called me asking if the allegations were true because Carter had listed me as his emergency contact. I told him about the criminal investigation and the evidence we'd found. Within an hour, Carter was suspended pending investigation by his company's ethics board. He texted me 17 times begging to talk, but I didn't respond. Dad reminded me to stay strong and not give him any ammunition to use against me. We met at a Denny's the following week with both our lawyers sitting at the table like referees. Carter looked terrible with dark circles under his eyes and clothes that didn't match. His lawyer did most of the talking while Carter stared at his hands. Finally, Carter spoke up and admitted he'd been scared of losing the house when Pierce got sick. He said Weinstein convinced him Pierce's organs could save other kids, and at least his death would mean something. He claimed he thought Pierce was already gone mentally, even though the doctor said otherwise. His lawyer touched his arm to make him stop talking, but Carter kept going. He said the money felt dirty, but we needed it for Lila's future. I wanted to throw my water at him, but my lawyer grabbed my wrist under the table. That night, I found Lila's letter to Santa in the memory box I kept in my closet. Her 4-year-old handwriting was shaky, but you could read every word asking for Pierce to come back. The paper still had tear stains that had warped the crayon marks. I sat on my bedroom floor reading it over and over until something finally clicked in my brain. I didn't need to forgive myself for getting coffee because I didn't do anything wrong. Carter was the one who needed forgiveness, but he'd never get it from me. The complete medical logs arrived by courier 3 days later in 2 banker's boxes. My attorney and I spent 6 hours going through every page with highlighters and sticky notes. There it was in black and white on page 847. Weinstein had marked the consent as obtained with both parents present when the timestamp showed I was logged into the cafeteria register buying coffee. The falsification was so obvious that my attorney actually laughed. She said this alone could get Weinstein more prison time and destroy any defense Carter might try to build. We made color copies of everything and stored them in 3 different locations. Dad came over that weekend and helped me set up a recording app on my phone that would automatically save everything to the cloud. He showed me how to activate it quickly and how to position my phone to get clear audio. We practiced different scenarios like Carter showing up at the house or approaching me in public. Dad said building an airtight case meant being ready for anything and documenting every single interaction. He bought me a small camera for my car and helped install it to record if Carter tried to confront me in the parking lot. We were creating a wall of evidence that would protect Lila and make sure justice actually happened this time. 3 weeks later, the hospital's legal team called my attorney with a new offer, this time for $200,000 with no NDA attached. My lawyer laid out the papers on her conference table and pointed to each section while I tried to focus. The money would secure Lila's college fund and therapy through high school. My hands shook as I held the pen over the signature line. Taking their money felt like letting them buy their way out of accountability, but watching my daughter struggle in the school because I couldn't afford the special counselor she needed felt worse. I set the pen down and asked for 48 hours to think. That same afternoon, a reporter from the local paper called asking if I'd contribute to their series on Weinstein's victims. She said 12 other families had already shared their stories anonymously. I met her at a coffee shop downtown where she showed me drafts of the other articles. One mother described finding her husband's secret bank account 6 months after their son died. Another family discovered the truth when Weinstein got arrested and their medical records became evidence. I spent 3 hours telling her everything while she typed on her laptop. She showed me the draft before submitting it, changing details to protect our identity but keeping the $75,000 and the boat purchase. Seeing our nightmare typed out in black and white made my stomach turn. 2 days later, the article ran on the front page with the headline, "The Price of Trust." My phone buzzed nonstop with texts from people who recognized our story despite the changed names. Pierce's brain was actually getting better according to Dr. Namari, but Carter told the doctor Pierce wouldn't want to live that way. That makes me wonder what Carter was really thinking during those secret meetings with Weinstein before everything happened. The recipient mother emailed me that night with 3 pages of apology and an offer to testify about what they witnessed at the cemetery. She attached medical studies showing Pierce's type of brain activity often led to recovery. Her daughter was doing well but carried survivor's guilt, knowing another child died for her to live. They wanted to join our push for hospital oversight reform. I printed the email and added it to my evidence binder. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse and filed for legal separation. The clerk handed me packet after packet of forms while explaining the custody evaluation process. I requested supervised visitation for Carter and sole legal custody for medical and educational decisions. The filing fee emptied my checking account, but Dad wrote me a check before I could even ask. Within a week, Carter got served at his apartment and immediately called the house phone 17 times. I didn't answer and saved the voicemail transcripts showing his panic. My attorney helped me draft a formal custody proposal, giving him every other weekend with a court-appointed supervisor. 2 weeks into the separation proceedings, Carter's lawyer delivered his written statement to mine. The document claimed Weinstein told him Pierce was technically brain dead, with no meaningful chance of recovery. But the medical records I'd gathered showed Pierce's brain scans improving daily before his death. Carter's statement also said I agreed to the decision verbally before leaving for coffee. My attorney laughed out loud reading that part since the security footage showed me walking to the cafeteria alone, crying. She highlighted every contradiction and filed it as evidence of ongoing deception. Through my Freedom of Information request, I finally got the hospital's internal audit from the year Pierce died. The 50-page report detailed 6 complaints about Weinstein pressuring families before any criminal investigation started. Hospital administrators held 3 meetings about her aggressive patient advocacy, but took no action. One page showed she generated more organ donations than any other coordinator in the state. The hospital's own ethics board flagged her numbers as statistically impossible without coercion. I made 5 copies and sent one to the newspaper reporter. That weekend, while Lila was at my mom's, I set up my phone to record a video message. I sat in Pierce's old room and talked to the camera for an hour about everything that happened. I explained why I fought so hard for the truth and why I couldn't stay married to someone who killed her brother. I showed her Pierce's baby pictures and the Mother's Day card he made me the year before he died. I put the video on a flash drive and locked it in my safety deposit box for when she turned 18. The deposition date arrived faster than expected. I wore my only suit and brought 3 binders of organized evidence. The hospital's lawyers sat across the massive table looking uncomfortable already. I presented the timeline calmly, showing each document and explaining what it proved. When they asked about my emotional state, I described finding out at a cemetery that my husband sold our son's life. Their lead attorney kept checking his phone and whispering to his colleague. After 4 hours, they called a recess and didn't object to any of my evidence submissions. Carter's deposition the next day went exactly as badly as my attorney predicted. The court reporter later told my lawyer she'd never seen someone contradict themselves so many times. When asked about his funeral speech claiming we both fought until the end, Carter broke down sobbing. He admitted he practiced that speech for days, knowing he'd pulled the plug while I was gone. When questioned about the $75,000, he first denied it, then claimed it was less, and finally admitted the full amount. His lawyer kept trying to redirect, but Carter couldn't stop talking. He said the guilt was eating him alive and he wanted to die. The hospital's attorneys exchanged worried looks when he mentioned Weinstein called him 6 times the week Pierce died. A month after the depositions, the district attorney's office sent a letter declining to file criminal charges. They cited insufficient evidence of criminal intent and the statute of limitations on fraud charges. I wasn't surprised since Carter's lawyer probably negotiated immunity in exchange for testimony against the hospital. The civil case would continue regardless. My attorney said we had enough evidence to destroy the hospital's reputation, even if criminal charges never came. 3 weeks later, my attorney filed the civil lawsuit against Memorial Hospital and Carter, and we joined 14 other families who'd been victims of the same scheme. The conference room at the law firm was packed with parents holding tissue boxes and thick folders of medical records. Each family told their story, and I realized ours wasn't even the worst one. One mother lost twins when her husband were accepted $100,000. Another father killed himself after learning what he'd done. The lead attorney explained we had enough evidence to potentially bankrupt the hospital, which made their insurance company suddenly very interested in settling. I started EMDR therapy the following Monday because regular therapy wasn't touching the trauma. The therapist moved her fingers back and forth while I recalled finding out at the cemetery, and somehow my brain started processing it differently. That first session left me exhausted, but something shifted. I actually slept 8 hours that night without waking up screaming Pierce's name. The nightmares didn't stop completely, but they changed from reliving that cemetery moment to just regular bad dreams. My body stopped feeling like it was constantly on alert. The court issued an order freezing all marital assets 2 days after we filed for divorce. Carter's lawyer tried arguing the boat was a gift from his cousin, but I had the bank records showing the cash deposits and wire transfers. The judge looked disgusted when she reviewed the evidence and ordered the boat listed for immediate sale. Carter stood there watching his $60,000 toy get taken away, the same boat he'd been posting pictures of on social media while I was planning Pierce's funeral. The marina called me when they came to repossess it and found personal items still on board, including Pierce's old life jacket that Carter had kept as some sick trophy. I met the recipient mother at a coffee shop downtown after weeks of texting back and forth. She brought a photo album showing her daughter healthy and playing soccer. The girl had Pierce's liver and was thriving after years of being too sick to leave the hospital. Part of me wanted to hate this child, but I couldn't. She was innocent in all this. Her mother cried when she told me they never would have accepted the organs if they'd known Carter was paid. She showed me the thank you card her daughter wrote to our family that they never sent because they found out the truth first. We sat there for 3 hours sharing pictures and stories, 2 mothers connected by the worst kind of tragedy. The hospital settlement offer jumped from $50,000 to $500,000 after our attorney threatened to go public with all 14 cases. They included full coverage for Lila's therapy until she turned 21 plus my therapy costs. My attorney said we could probably get more if we pushed, but I was tired of fighting. Other families were settling too because we all needed to move forward. After 2 weeks of going back and forth with my attorney, I accepted the settlement but refused to sign any gag order about Pierce. They tried making silence a condition, but I held firm. Some battles matter more than money, and Pierce's story needed to be told. The hospital finally agreed when they realized I'd walk away from everything before staying quiet. Carter moved into a 1-bedroom apartment across town, and we started using a co-parenting app called Talking Parents that documents everything. No more phone calls or texts that he could lie about later. Every message got saved with timestamps. He tried calling me directly once, but I didn't answer and reminded him through the app about our communication agreement. His first message was 3 paragraphs of apologies, but I didn't respond except to confirm pickup times for Lila. Our first custody exchange happened at the police station parking lot because my attorney insisted on a neutral location with cameras. Lila didn't understand why we couldn't just meet at home, but she seemed calmer with the structure. Carter looked terrible with dark circles and weight loss, but I felt nothing seeing him. He tried to hand me an envelope, but I pointed to the custody box we'd agreed to use for exchanges. The officer on duty watched the whole thing and nodded when I drove away. 2 months after everything started, I finally spoke at the support group meeting without blaming myself for getting coffee. I told them about Pierce squeezing my hand and Carter pulling the plug while I was gone. The other parents understood immediately. One father said absence isn't betrayal, and everyone nodded. Another mother whose husband did something similar said forgiving ourselves for being human isn't the same as forgiving someone for being a monster. Dad came over that weekend and apologized for wanting to hurt Carter at the cemetery. He said he'd been having dreams about Pierce and realized violence wouldn't bring him back. We agreed to focus on protecting Lila and making sure Pierce's story helped other families. Dad started building a memory box with Lila, filling it with Pierce's favorite things and stories about him. Mom helped by printing all the photos from before that day. We spent Sunday afternoons working on it together while Lila drew new pictures to add. The anniversary of Pierce's death came faster than I expected, and we kept it small with just Mom, Dad, my sister, Lila, and me at the cemetery. The timing of that district attorney letter seems really convenient for the hospital. Declining charges right when Carter's ready to testify against them makes me wonder what conversations happened behind closed doors that we're not hearing about, especially with 14 families all having similar stories about this same coordinator. Carter wasn't invited and didn't ask to come through the app. I brought the sweater his grandmother had knitted before she passed, the one with dinosaurs on it that Pierce would have loved, and I wrapped it in tissue paper to leave at his grave. Lila put her newest drawing next to it, one where Pierce was playing soccer in heaven, and Dad cleared his throat a lot while Mom held my hand. We didn't stay long because Lila got cold, but before we left, I touched the headstone and told Pierce I knew the truth now. The nonprofit called me the next week about a part-time position helping families who lost children, and even though the pay was half what I made before, I took it immediately. My first day back at work felt strange after being home for so long, but the other parents there understood why I needed 10 minutes in the bathroom to collect myself. The bills got tight with the lower salary, but the settlement money covered Lila's therapy and our basic needs. I started bringing lunch from home and canceled the streaming services Carter had signed us up for with his blood money. The co-parenting app became our only communication method, and every message got documented with timestamps. Carter tried texting me directly about Lila's school play, but I screenshot it and reminded him through the app about our agreement. His supervised visits happened every other Saturday at the community center where a social worker watched them play board games. Lila didn't understand why Daddy couldn't take her to the park alone anymore, but she adjusted to the new routine. 6 months after that day at the cemetery, I could finally think about Pierce without my chest feeling crushed. His death wasn't some tragic accident or God's plan like everyone kept saying at the funeral. It was a betrayal by the person who should have protected him. Naming that difference out loud in therapy helped more than 2 years of blaming myself for getting coffee. The guilt didn't disappear, but it shifted to where it belonged. Lila started play therapy with someone who specialized in childhood grief, and after 3 months, she stopped drawing hospitals in every picture. Her therapist taught her to make a feelings journal where she could write letters to Pierce about happy memories instead of just sad ones. She wrote about the time he taught her to ride her bike and when they built a fort in the living room during a thunderstorm. The pictures she drew now showed Pierce doing fun things like eating ice cream cream, or playing with their old dog instead of lying in a hospital bed. At the support group, 5 of us whose kids were victims of the same scheme started meeting with a lawyer about hospital oversight. We spent Tuesday nights going through policies and procedures, marking every place where safeguards failed our children. 3 months later, we presented our recommendations to the hospital board, and they actually listened because their lawyers knew we could make things very public. The new protocols we helped create required 2 independent doctors to sign off on any end-of-life decision, and banned financial incentives for organ procurement. My sister introduced me to someone from her gym who'd lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago. We met for coffee first, and he didn't flinch when I told him about Carter and Pierce, just nodded and said, "Trust takes time to rebuild." He understood why I checked my phone constantly during our first dates to make sure Lila was okay with the babysitter. After 2 months, I let him meet Lila at a playground, and she liked that he pushed her high on the swings without me having to ask. He never tried to be her dad, just a friend who happened to know her mom, and that made everything easier. Life started feeling possible again, even though it looked nothing like what I'd planned when Pierce was alive. Some mornings I woke up without immediately remembering he was gone. Then the guilt would hit for forgetting even for a second. But Lila laughed more now. Real belly laughs while watching cartoons or playing with friends, not the forced smiles from right after. I caught glimpses of Pierce in her expression sometimes, the way she scrunched her nose when concentrating or how she tilted her head when asking questions. Those moments hurt, but they also felt like gifts, little pieces of him still here in his sister. The resurrection I'd prayed for never came, but seeing Pierce live on through Lila's laugh mattered more than any miracle could have. Thanks for letting me wonder along with you through all of this. Hope my questions didn't get too annoying. See you around, and hey, like the video, it helps more than you think.